Hi, I'm Alex.
And I'm Eddie.
Welcome to the 11th episode of Catch 52, a politics podcast brought to you by WDSR, Duquesne Student Radio.
We are now 41 weeks away from Inauguration Day 2021, and we were going to bring you an episode based on all the different primaries that happened this week, and it was going to be called Voting's Back, but as we've mentioned earlier, and as I'm sure you all know, those did not really kind of happen.
Well, voting is back, just not in the way that we would ever want it to be. Okay. Wisconsin.
Yes. So the governor of Wisconsin said no primary because, there's a global pandemic and you shouldn't expect people to come out and vote.
I feel like that's fair.
It's a pretty normal thing to want, to just like postpone voting for a few, weeks or maybe a few months, just so this can die down and people aren't exposing themselves to danger by voting. And then the Wisconsin Supreme Court, among party lines, voted to keep the primary in place. And that's where we stood Tuesday going into the primary.
Now, look, okay, first things first. Statistically speaking, there will be people who die because they went to vote in Wisconsin.
Yes.
That's not something that anybody expected to be saying in America in the 21st century, but hey, Here we are. People died to vote in a primary.
Yep.
Not even in the general, in the primary.
Mm-hmm. And in primaries that ultimately don't really mean anything. We'll get to that in just a sec, but
like
people voted, and in Iowa fashion, the results are not going to be expected until the 13th, not because of any failure in technology, but just because I'm guessing they want to keep people away from each other and they're taking their time with this.
Failure of common sense, I think it's pretty fair to say.
Yeah, but ultimately that doesn't really matter anymore, nor do really any of the primaries coming up since Bernie Sanders officially dropped out of the presidential race a few days ago.
Let's a moment of silence.
Yes.
A moment of silence for Bernie.
We should do our little moment of silence. Bernie Sanders.
All right. So before we go into what I think we should be talking about for the rest of today, every other primary has been delayed. The Alaska primary, the Hawaii primary, the Democratic National Convention has been postponed until August. It's still in Milwaukee, thank goodness. So that'll be pretty interesting that it's juxtaposed with the Republican convention.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Bernie. Is he done after this?
He is, I believe, 78 right now. So having an 82-year-old running for president, I don't think is the best idea, especially considering how he already had a heart attack this campaign. It's going to be hard to see him imagine him running in 2022.
And
it's going to be very hard.
When is he up for election? Not this year, but
he was first elected in 2007. So it would be in 2022 as well.
Okay, we got 2 more years of Bernie.
Yeah,
and then he's done.
Probably done. Yeah.
So, first of all, I was watching a doc. I don't know if I want to call it a documentary, but I was watching like a YouTube video talking about like Bernie Sanders' whole political career, and it's kind of like I remember that I read about how he started out in the oh boy, I'm gonna get torn apart for this. He started in the
Burlington City Council, right?
Well, he started off in the Burlington City Council, and he ran, as a socialist on the actual party that he started out running for, like his first
Workers'
race
Party
was
of Vermont, correct?
Yeah, it was something not like outwardly communist, but like very, very socialist with a lot of those like buzzwords, like maybe like the Vermont Workers' Party. That sounds, or like a union
like
party. And he literally, I think he ran for Senate.
Something. So he's had a pretty long, pretty storied career that's gone for about 50 years now since he started in the early 70s.
Bernie Sanders to me is like the textbook example of somebody who it's like he stuck to his guns, but he really the evolution of Bernie Sanders is, I think, a not enough talked about subject because he actually had more extreme positions when he was younger.
Yeah,
younger, like in his 30s and 40s. Yeah. Like when he was running for those parties. It wasn't until he got on the council and started actually running for Vermont office, like quote unquote seriously. And I think he was serious before, but like as a candidate that people had a shot of electing, that he kind of toned it down. But if you look, I mean, he really didn't.
What he's toned down is really just the language behind his proposals, not necessarily the proposals themselves.
So here's something that I'm curious about. Do you think that we have changed around Bernie, or do you think that Bernie has changed, or that Bernie has changed as the world has progressed, if you will?
I think it really depends on what you're looking on. There are definitely some fields where he's changed. But if you look at like his stances on gay rights or on foreign affairs, he's been saying the same things, same buzzwords, same policies that since he was first elected in the House, and now in his 2 presidential campaigns, it's been the same language constantly.
Yeah, I can only think of a few things that he's changed on. I think he maybe changed a little bit on foreign policy, but again, that's very situational.
Yeah. He's generally been very interventionist.
Yeah, and guns.
Yeah.
When he was first elected, he was pretty shifty on guns, but I feel like that, again, he's representing Vermont, so it's not his job to be an activist about guns.
No, Vermont is a very rural state, and that for how liberal it is, there are a surprising number of gun holders there, because mostly for hunting rights, but generally it's, especially for a progressive state, very high in gun ownership. But the bigger question is not necessarily how has Bernie changed over the years, but how much he was able to change the Democratic Party in just 5 years. So if
that's true.
Looking at the Democratic Party in 2015, it's completely different than where it is today. I mean, first off, Biden was a respected candidate and someone people actively wanted to be president. But second off, you didn't have people talking about a majority of the stuff that was on Bernie's campaign. That's what made his campaign in 2016 so shocking. And so, that's why the media joked about it for so long before they realized he actually was a viable candidate.
I'll never forget because I didn't, like the rest of us, I didn't know who Bernie Sanders was until 2016. Mm-hmm. And the way I was introduced to Bernie Sanders was through a Jon Stewart bit, because, I mean, look at me.
Yeah.
And it's Bernie standing like in front of a pier or something like that. I don't know, like there was like a lake or an ocean. Yeah, behind him. And the Daily Show team, like they like cut up his speech and basically was like into his buzzwords, and he was like, Medicare for all, free college tuition, getting out of these dang the stuff that he says.
Yeah.
And then, but before he had said that, Jon Stewart ran a clip of basically every major news network, probably somewhere on ABC, because I think I don't know, maybe there were a few MSNBC anchors back then that were like pretty anti Bernie.
Yeah.
They all seem to have retired by now. But Jon Stewart's team, they played a clip of them being like, oh, look at this guy, he's a socialist, for God's sake, he's a loon. And then play Bernie's speech, and then Jon Stewart goes, what a reasonable left of center politician.
Yeah. I remember.
And I was just like, huh? I didn't know people like this existed.
Yeah, I remember in 2016 going on Reddit one morning, because it was 2016, and that's what teenage guys do, and seeing like on the front page the #1 post being like, Bernie Sanders, a socialist from Vermont, announces his presidential campaign. And I was like, what? And I read into it. I was like, oh yeah, I kind of like this guy. And I came downstairs. I was like, Mom, Dad, did you hear about Bernie Sanders running for president? And they were like, who? Doing what? And I mean, that picture is a classic picture that you see all the time among like Bernie fans now, where it's him and like 5 supporters in one news outlet there. And then like juxtaposed with his pictures of rallies that he's sold out like football stadiums. It's been quite the trip for him and quite the trip for the party. Especially on all the issues he's pushed the party left on.
And you can say that it's so interesting, because you can say Bernie Sanders has this storied political career. You can really summarize, leave Joe Mentum strong. you can you can really summarize Bernie's whole like impact that he's had, not just upon the American political system, but I think upon the world.
Yeah.
In the past 5 years, which I think his entire career was kind of building to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But his whole impact, that's a weird thing that I think not enough people talk about for Sanders, is that his impact didn't come through legislation. It actually just came through being loud and saying things that people wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm. And a common critique of Bernie is that none of his policies really get passed that he proposes in the Senate. So, you know, Medicare for All, Green New Deal, all the other stuff that
other people will pass them.
Other things that we're about to talk about. But the thing is, what he does is his main role in the Senate especially has not been passing key points of legislation, but pushing everyone very slowly left so that things like Obamacare can get passed, because he's arguing, you know, he's doing the, I can't remember the name of the psychological technique, but Trump does it too, where, you know, you're super extreme on an issue so that the moderates on your same side seem normal and correct. So, you know, Trump being so harsh on immigration makes a reasonable Republican who might be saying, you know, what, you know, Bush's policies on immigration were, seem normal and much more palatable. And
exactly.
Bernie's done that a lot in the Senate, regardless of whether you like or dislike his policies. Bernie Sanders is probably one of the most important people in the passage of like Obamacare and other major acts like that have happened in the Senate in the past 10
And weirdly enough,
years.
it's not because of anything that he's done,
mm-hmm.
but it's because of everything that he just Bernie shouting is the best thing that he could possibly do, which is a weird thing to say out loud, but in hindsight, it's pretty true.
Yeah.
I would never think of Bernie Sanders in terms of like, I would never think of Bernie Sanders in terms of like realist politics.
No.
Like, he is sort of the, I think a lot of people view Bernie Sanders as like the poster boy for idealist politics.
Yeah. When you know, he's not like a policy grognard. He's more of just like I mean, he's really a master at talking points and having like catching phrases that actually
he is a master of, he's easily
in the way that probably you haven't seen a Democrat since at least Clinton. We talked about this in the first episode, how Democrats, you know, you couldn't name one Hillary policy because she couldn't make them memorable. You could name an Obama policy, but not by his own doing. That's because Obamacare became the term for it. But like, when you think Bernie, you think Medicare for all, Green New Deal, college for all, stop endless wars, like all these short, catchy phrases that people remember and they know what they mean in the same way that you know what build the wall means or lock her up or any of Trump's policies. And I think that that's something that Bernie has been really successful in pushing the Democratic Party to do.
Yeah, in that sense, Bernie is sort of a transcendent politician. That is sort of, he is the Democrats' Barry Goldwater.
Very much so, yeah.
And we're gonna see who follows, because were they on the debate stage? Maybe. History says no, but just to draw some parallels, I mean, you have a weird guy who comes out and speaks for a lot of people that haven't been heard and shifts a party in a particular direction.
Yeah.
And that person is not elected, but he's considered very electable, and there's a lot of controversy, but also that person still has a lot of credibility. Say what you will about Barry Goldwater, I think that's kind of an apt comparison.
I mean, it's also true about Trump, though, for how opposite they are ideologically, in terms of their actual, like, general, the way they talk, the way they present themselves. They're both very big populist candidates and both very good at messaging. And, you know, and also they're, you know, viewed as somewhat outsiders, even though Bernie's been in politics for 50 years. They're both, in 2016, were both viewed as outsiders, not establishment, and, you know, willing to make big changes regardless of what the party says or the establishment says. And there's a lot of support for this. Like, you did see people that were Bernie or Trump voters, like, not, which is a weird thing to think, but it's really that they were both so good at messaging that gave them that support that they had in 2016 and in 2020.
It shows, Bernie really came through for the Democrats and reminded the Democratic Party that people actually do like what the Democrats have to say, and that we don't have to be, ramming things down people's throats in like deep throated arguments and stuff like that. Like, we can do that, but we don't always have to.
Yeah. And like, it sounds, so me saying this sounds derogatory, but I mean it in the best way, that he pushed the Democrats away from just being the party of intellectuals, not in the sense that he dumbed down the party, but in the sense that he made complex arguments like single payer healthcare understandable for the common American who might not have the time to research or read into complex things like the Green New Deal. And we should get into specific policies, but like his ability to push to make complex topics simple to understand, I think really will help the Democratic Party in the future if we have more people like that going forward, regardless of where they are ideologically.
So, all right, on those Bernie policies that he's been literally calling for, well, some of them for not as long. Yeah. I guess healthcare, start with the big one.
Yeah, Medicare for all. When you think Bernie Sanders, you think Medicare for all. When you think healthcare reform, you probably think either repeal and replace or Medicare for all.
Okay, let's hit up repeal and replace. When's the last time you heard that said out loud?
Probably when the American Health Care Act failed back in
repeal and replace.
Probably 1994. That's what it feels like.
Ann Coulter said that if Trump didn't build the wall, he wouldn't get reelected. That's what she said. I think that I always thought that Trump was going to die on the hill of healthcare.
Yeah.
Clearly not, because repeal and replace has been the biggest bait and switch in electoral history, and I will stand by that. The entire campaign ran around Hillary's personality in 2016, right? But the whole pitch was basically, I'm going to make you feel good as an American and repeal and replace Obamacare. That was his thing that he would say over and over and over again. They haven't done anything.
No, ever since the American Health Care Act of 2017 failed. Thank you to Rand Paul for that.
It's weird things to be thanking Rand Paul for. There's a surprising amount of them.
Anyway. Moving the tax deadline, keeping Obamacare from being Obamacare light, as he called it. The Republicans haven't really done much about healthcare ever since that, other than repealing the individual mandate and failing to pass that.
And to turn to the election a little bit, I feel like that's something that is going to get a ton of coverage.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything about healthcare. It's like, well, I bet nobody cares about oh, wait a second.
Yeah. Well, now, if the Democrats are able to, frame this in a good way where Trump did nothing to fix your healthcare costs, like there is a story to be told there. But judging by how this Biden campaign's being run, you don't know that. When was the last time you heard any news about Joe Biden?
Didn't he give a really rough interview the other day? I don't know.
When was the last time you heard something good that Joe Biden did?
Yeah, exactly.
He's been absent this entire outbreak, and that's really bad news for the Democrats.
Yep,
their presumptive nominee is just not being even the leader of the party right now. He's just kind of hiding behind the curtains and tweeting, which
I didn't even know Joe Biden tweeted.
Oh, his staffers are tweeting. Yeah, so it's not the best look for him right now.
Yeah, I mean, with the recruit Cuomo and everything like that. I mean, that's not a thing. I feel like this country is being led by the Cuomo brothers. Like, that's what it feels like. And with presented by Dr. Fauci. Like, that's what it feels like.
Say what you want about how Trump is handling this outbreak. At least he's present and talking about it, and pretty much every day giving a press conference. That's true. He gave 3 press conferences total before this. It was a common thing, in Obama before, to give weekly press conferences typically.
Yeah.
Trump gave 2 before 2020. And now is giving press conferences every other day. And, regardless of policy, if you just look at physical presence, is physically acting like a president.
Yeah, physical
whereas
presence
Biden
is really
important. Not at all. You hear Trump's name in the news, and there is that psychological effect of the more you hear someone's name, good or bad, that sticks in your head. You are not hearing anything about Biden right now.
I would push back a little bit, because I do feel like during of this time of all times, being present and being inaccurate is detrimental from like a national from like in doing doing the right thing perspective.
Oh, I agree.
But like in the political realm, yeah, just I mean, it's politics. It's all about showing up.
If you're talking about, who's doing the best thing, I think that, going out every day and saying incorrect stuff is worse than saying nothing. But if you're talking about, trying to get elected, Trump won by going out every single day and saying the wrong things.
That's very true. Like, that's so true.
You don't win by hiding behind and doing nothing. That's one of the many reasons Hillary lost in 2016.
You don't win with fake Twitter hugs.
Yeah, she was not active. She was not present. She was not actively as common in the news as Trump. And that's a huge reason as to why she lost. And that's exactly what the Biden campaign is doing right now. And that's really risky. Even Bernie, you saw like out talking, giving more town halls. He has a COVID-19 section on his website. I'm not sure if the Biden campaign does. You hear him giving interviews about what needs to be done and criticizing Trump every single day about his efforts. And
even Elizabeth Warren is more in the news. She had a piece in Vox about, she's got a plan for coronavirus, which, I mean, thank you, Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, you do not hear Biden out there. And when messaging is so important, no messaging is even worse than bad messaging.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I guess it leads me to another thing that I've been wondering about, which is, sure, the Biden campaign has been sucking. They've been doing terribly, but is there any room for anybody else to pick up the slack of the mantle of people that care about being correct and care about America?
What do you mean?
Like, Trump is showing up every other day and giving a press conference. He's showing up, he's saying things, and he's looking pretty terrible. He's giving, campaign ads a lot of fodder. But at the end of the day, he's showing up. A new RCP polls came out the other day. They have, I think it's a Monmouth poll, has Biden up in the general +4, but that means nothing. The general approval rating is, I've seen anywhere between +4, people approve by 4 points and people disapprove by 13 points. Generally, most people, it seems, disapprove by about 5 or 6 points. But in terms of the act of showing up politically, I've been wondering if there's room for somebody else in the Democratic Party to actually step up in the political realm and
Cuomo found that space. I mean, Cuomo's been getting...
Yeah, but Cuomo hasn't been political.
But I think that's not a bad thing. I think that, the fact that Cuomo is showing up every day and is giving not bad responses. I mean, if you look at who people trust the most...
No, Cuomo's been great.
People trust, I think it was a Washington Post poll released yesterday, which would be Wednesday, the 7th. Okay. And if you look at the poll, it was... if you look at the poll, it's that people trust Dr. Anthony Fauci more than anyone else as an American expert on coronavirus.
Makes sense.
Number 2 is Andrew Cuomo.
I mean, yeah, the man is out there every day.
He's not being political. He's out there every single day talking to people, answering questions, and informing people, the proper CDC, World Health Organization guidelines, and not threatening to take funding away from the World Health Organization like Trump is doing.
Can I just hit on that point for a second? The World Health Organization?
Yeah.
Okay. One of my biggest pet peeves of the Trump administration, and my hair is getting messed up because I'm furious about this, is that, okay, they defunded the State Department, right? They cut State Department funding by like 33%. You know where we really need the State Department? The World Health Organization.
Yep.
And, and China, it's been coming out. Like, every major multilateral diplomatic event that happens in the world, we send like 2 or 3 diplomats. It's all we can afford to send. China sends like 50.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we can't go to all the meetings, but we should be in all the meetings. And so we can't decide WHO policy. It is literally our own fault that this is happening to us, even though the World Health Organization is doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Like, and if you look at the average rating, so it was a poll that said on a scale of 1 to 5, where do you rank this person in terms of trustworthiness? Mm-hmm. Dr. Fauci had a 3.8, Cuomo had a 3.3. So that's generally pretty good. Biden had a 2.76, Trump had a 2.5, and Steve Mnuchin also had a 2.5. So,
Steve Mnuchin, why is he getting ranked?
Because he's showing up to the meetings also and talking.
Oh, okay.
But
I mean, it's like I trust Stephen Mnuchin to look like John Oliver and to give me my stimulus check.
Like, if I guess that's probably also why he's there, is because of the stimulus check. But you see with like Trump especially, but even with Biden, that you see the partisan divide where it's 2.5 or a little bit above or a little bit below, because the Democrats say, yeah, I trust Biden, and the Republicans are saying, no, I don't, and vice versa with Trump. But with Cuomo, you have a 3.2, which means Republicans are trusting Cuomo, and with Fauci, you have a 3, like almost a 4, which means basically everyone is supporting him. And
basically everybody except the Trump base is supporting Fauci.
So it's like, you don't need to be political right now to be winning. I don't want to frame it like this, because obviously there's so much more to the coronavirus than what I'm about to mention. And this is not what I'm not saying this is the most important thing. But politically, if you're talking about who's quote unquote winning from the coronavirus, it's Andrew Cuomo.
Okay.
Hands down, it's Andrew Cuomo.
Keyword politically. Yes, you're absolutely right.
No one is winning from the coronavirus. No one should win from the coronavirus.
But if there's somebody who we could say is getting a bump in their national profile,
it's Andrew Cuomo, hands down.
Unfortunately, we can't recruit him to run for president.
No. I mean, who knows? I would not be surprised if this pushed him up enough where he can make a bid in 2022 or 2024 or 2028.
Honestly,
that's far away from now. And we've had enough New Yorker presidents in the past 4 years with one.
But like, we should get a real New York president, I guess is what I'm saying. Actually, Trump is a pretty real New York president if you think about it.
Hillary would have also been a New York president.
Oh, what are you talking about? Arkansas.
She was the senator from New York. But anyways, pivoting back to Bernie, we got a little derailed there. So still talking about health, how far he pushed the party left on healthcare. So, Obama was pushing Koch brothers plan for Romney Care to make it national in Obamacare. That's almost exactly what he did. And the Romney eventually disagreed with it because it was a state program versus the federal program. Say what you want about that, but it was a very moderate, maybe even right of center policy.
Yes.
It was just incentivizing more competition by opening state lines and making sure that everyone was competing.
The key selling point of Obamacare is that it was efficient. It was more efficient for us as a country to get everybody on health insurance.
So, you did see people talking about healthcare reform as early as 2008 during that recession. But the big difference was that you didn't see anyone talking about socialized healthcare in any form. People were calling Obamacare socialism because of the individual mandate. And then 8 years later, you have this Vermont loon running on, we're the only industrialized nation to not have single payer healthcare. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Medicare for all is like everywhere. Everyone knew about Medicare for all. Everyone had an opinion on Medicare for all.
That's true.
In 2008, if you asked Republicans, they'd probably say, no, I don't want government-run healthcare. But if you ask Democrats,
they'd be like, what even is that?
Yeah, what do you mean? Oh, government running all healthcare? Oh, I don't know about that. Like, I want to see Obamacare work for it. I mean, people loved Obamacare in 2016. That's why Hillary was running on improving Obamacare. That's why Biden now was still running on
improving Obamacare. Like,
yeah, which means nothing, but except for like strength, it was improving and strengthening Obamacare or something.
Could have done more with like enrollment programs and stuff like that, like given more funding. But
like generally, it was
improving it.
It was a pretty moderate, still center, if not right of center, policy approach. And then Sanders comes in and just completely shifts the party way left of that. So now you have the moderate candidates looking for a public option. That was the moderate Democratic position in 2020.
Yeah.
So Hillary was still running in 2016 on Obamacare. Bernie was running on Medicare for all. And then the next 4 years, you see the Hillary Democrats, to use a pejorative phrase to all the people running, were like running on single payer. Klobuchar was running on semi-single payer. Buttigieg was running on
effectively
on public option. Sorry, Klobuchar on semi-public option. Biden's running public option. Every moderate was running on this left of center principle that Obama wasn't even outwardly in favor
I guess so. Maybe what we're saying is Bernie Sanders moved the Democratic Party back to where it should have been all along.
Probably. The thing is, will single payer health, or will even, if Biden's elected and he keeps his majority in the House, and
they won't have a single payer system if
not single payer,
Biden's
but
elected.
But a public option. Will that get through the Senate? That's a big question. Even if the Democrats have a 51-49 majority, which is a slim
it'll have
possibility,
to be a cutthroat public option.
It would be a very skinny public option. So politically,
skinny bill.
Politically, it might not be where they should be, but in terms of ideology, it's much more with the rest of their policies now. I think the general Democratic platform now is pretty much a public option.
I think that's fair.
And so, you have Medicare for all, and thank you, Pete, for this one, Medicare for all who want it. But the fact that from 2008 we had the Affordable Health Care Act, and now the moderates are saying Medicare for all who want it is huge shift over in less than a decade. You saw just the party shift so left on that issue.
I think, and again, I could be wrong on this one.
Yeah.
I think that Bernie Sanders, so I alluded to Goldwater before, but he may have been something different. I think Bernie Sanders might have been people's support for Bernie Sanders. Now, obviously, people's support for Bernie Sanders comes out of a lot of things that this is by no means the only thing, but he represents kind of an acid reflux to the new Democrats. So to Clinton. Mm-hmm. I think Clinton being elected to 2 terms, no less, is really it's really the party moving, because Clinton is moving to the right.
Clinton was a slightly more right version of Carter, but Carter, you didn't really have a very left-leaning president since Johnson, and before that, since FDR. Kennedy was a pretty moderate right or moderate left president. Economically, he was pretty socially conservative. He cut taxes. Republicans love that one. Well, Kennedy cut taxes. And he was a fiscally conservative president.
Reagan raised taxes, and so did HW.
Yeah.
So deal with it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You saw pretty moderate Democratic candidates from basically from when our parents were cognizant of politics through today, up until Bernie, other than Bernie, really.
It's the return to the Democrats as a proper left wing, and I mean, and I don't mean the left, the capital L left, but a proper left of center party. Yeah,
if you look at the new Democrats,
the Democrats weren't a proper left of center party.
Some people would put, if you look at a political compass, some people would put Obama in authoritarian right, at probably +1+1, and Hillary even farther right than Obama.
Yeah,
Bernie is much more there, and Joe Biden's probably about as 0-0 as a candidate can possibly be, and probably very intentionally so.
I actually would disagree. I think Joe Biden's economically left,
but I think very slightly. I think,
hey man,
maybe John Delaney's your 0-0 candidate.
Stop it. Why is John Delaney our standard for everything?
Because apparently he'd win in Pennsylvania if you look at Jim. All right, but anyways, moving forward on policy, he also college for all was a big thing. So Obama was mostly focusing on refinancing college, student loan debt, and a lot of other semi-economically complex things. Not even canceling student debt, just refinancing.
No, refinancing might have been the healthy option when Obama was president. I think it was the healthy option. But look, making college free is not, it'll solve a good chunk of problems.
Yeah.
But you've got to have a plan for the financial side of things. Because look, as much as I want SoFi to go out of business, we have to have a plan to make that happen so that it doesn't send a ripple through the rest of the market.
Yeah. The thing is, regardless of how correct, I should say, a policy is, he did move the party left on higher education too. So Hillary was running on also refinancing student debt. And then
that's what that means.
No.
Refinancing student debt.
And then eventually, by the time the end of the primaries reached, she was free trade school and free associate's degrees for in-state colleges.
Bingo.
Which, again, moving from a pretty centrist position to an actual left-wing position. And that's another thing that Bernie did.
Same thing for Biden. You have Biden. Biden opened up when he, go back and watch our Biden episode.
Yeah.
Biden now has a plan, but I went back and I looked at it again because I was looking at loans last night, no particular reason. But so in addition to the to 2-year degrees being made free, hey, business schools, you should start doing 2-year programs because number one, that's what they should be, and number two, it'll get a lot more people to enroll.
Alex and I have been very outward in our discussion that basically every business degree except for accounting should be a 2-year associate's degree or a trade, because so first off, I'm under the agreement that marketing should be a
psych
marketing
degree.
should just be a psych degree. Yeah, if you want to be a marketing major, you should be in psych. That's what marketing classes basically are, anyways. As someone that's taken marketing classes, it's just applied psychology, and so marketing should be a psych degree. But regardless, the rest of it, it's not bad. Like, I'm not doing this to talk bad on business majors, but it is a lot of what you do can be covered in 2 years. And I think most business majors will admit that a lot of their classes are very, very repetitive, and if not repetitive, then intuitive. But regardless
encouraging
of that,
2-year colleges would be really good, and I think it would actually improve the efficiency of things. Hey, the second thing that Biden is doing, this is what I actually wanted to hit on. His refinancing program is actually really simple, but you can't you can't talk about it as a candidate. You'd have to be a talking head, and I don't trust Biden to articulately outline that he's going to fix your rate at 5%.
Yeah, it's hard to explain to someone, just the phrase refinancing student debt sounds so tired, and everyone's heard it and everyone has a general idea of what it means, and no one really
refinance. It's like a thing that your parents do on the house and you don't understand, but basically it means you're going to get the same thing but for a little cheaper. So yay, I guess, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But so Biden's going to, most people right now, I've checked, well, right now is an anomaly, but loans, usually student loans are locked in. If you want to get a fixed rate, it's at anywhere between 6.5% and 10%.
Yeah.
Biden's going to lock it in at 5%. That's what his plan is. And then basically he's going to lock it in at 5 over 20 years. So if you can, and it's based on what you can afford to pay. So if you're making the money, you should be paying it. But then if you can't, after 20 years, it's absolved. Really great system, impossible to explain in more than 10 words.
Yeah. So basically you shouldn't be paying more than more than $150,000 or $105,000 for your college education. But that's that.
I think education is the biggest example of what Bernie moved the party on. Well, no, healthcare first. So he moved the party on healthcare. I think as far as presidential platforms, he moved the party most on education.
And if you look at the other major thing that he's been very outspoken about is environmentalism, namely the Green New Deal. And as we discussed on that Biden episode also, the Green New Deal isn't necessarily anything new. It's just conglomerating a bunch of policies that Democrats already like.
Question on the Green New Deal. That was proposed officially by Ed Markey and
AOC. But it's very much a Bernie program.
Okay, it's one of those programs where Bernie shouting had an impact on it, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was also a very strong champion of it, being part of basically the one straight white male member of the squad. But regardless of that, the one big last thing we need to talk about with Bernie's 2020 campaign was the talking point now of, was this election also rigged?
Oh my God. Okay. No, I thought you were going to talk about, first of all,
I think it goes, no. Yeah.
Of course it wasn't rigged.
It goes without saying that 2016 was obviously rigged in Hillary Clinton's favor. Say what you will, a neoliberal might say that's not a big deal because it's the party and they get to choose their nominees. A populist would say, but the people should be able to choose their nominee for president so that they get elected easier. But regardless of your stance on that, it was rigged. Hillary got questions before debates. The party, wanted her to be the nominee. And regardless of superdelegates, it was biased in her favor. This election, on the other hand, wasn't. They claimed the rigging in all the people dropping out right before Super Tuesday.
That's not rigging. It's electoral strategy.
Yeah, it's not rigging. It's strategizing. You could say the Democratic Party did not want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee. This is true, as we saw. But the thing is, neither did the Democratic voter base.
Yes.
At the time he dropped out, he was at 35%, and Biden was at 55% at least. Like, he was losing to Biden. Fair, much fairer than Hillary at the very least. It was not rigged.
Unfortunately,
in that sense. Like,
I mean, fortunately, it wasn't rigged, obviously. But it's like, does it suck that Bernie had to roll out a tired talking point about turnout? Yeah, that was a little bit. That was because the thing that I loved about 2016 Bernie is that I felt like I could get behind 2016 Bernie 100%. Yeah, and it didn't feel like I had to sacrifice. It didn't feel like I had to sacrifice policy positions, and it didn't feel like I had to sacrifice anything from like a logical, argumentative perspective. It was like Bernie is winning here if you would just let the people speak. Yeah. Now, when I saw Bernie,
so in 2016, whenever you saw those Hillary Sanders debates, if you look at the polling averages, you can point out exactly when every single debate was, because Bernie had at least a 5-point jump in the polls every single debate. You didn't see it this time.
You didn't, and it was because not only that it was like he was waking people up. I think that's what 2016 was. Yeah. And then once people woke up, they started to become a lot more informed. I mean, I felt like I became a lot more informed. I started to care a lot more after that election cycle for obvious reasons. But then when people, I mean, not everybody who wakes up to that immediately jumps to the farthest left position. Yeah. Some people wake up and say, actually, there is a middle ground here. And we saw that. We saw that with Pete. We saw that with Warren to a certain extent. We saw that with Yang. I will never shut up about Yang. Bernie, by the way, didn't have a UBI platform. Bad Bernie.
Except when Yang was running, he said he was opposed to it. But he said later on in the campaign, he's not opposed to UBI. He'd be looking at it. I mean, he proposed a bill for coronavirus that was essentially temporary UBI. $2,000 a month for the rest of the year was his plan.
Anyway,
it's his plan, I guess, still. But
the second thing that made me have issues, so the number one thing I had issues with Bernie is it was hard for me for like a political electoral logic perspective to get behind him. Number two is I feel like Bernie's base was a lot more negative this time around. Yeah. The idea of I heard the word Bernie bro in 2016 at first, and I was like, oh, that's just people getting butthurt because they didn't like that people weren't full-throated behind Hillary. But I feel like the identity of a Bernie bro really took a turn for the worse this time around.
Yeah, it was a lot more toxic this time around.
I mean, they were going after Elizabeth Warren.
Before she refused to endorse him, they were going after her for not being far left enough.
I'm not going to say exactly who this person is, but I can think of a few people who would agree with everything Elizabeth Warren has to say, but on policy. But then during the election, they called her a snake. Yeah. And it's like Elizabeth Warren is super left wing. It's just she's trying to work within the current system rather than blow it up. Yeah. And it's nope. Elizabeth Warren is a snake.
The other last thing we need to talk about on the same note is a lot of those people that are claiming that the election was rigged are now, you see on Twitter the hashtag walk away, which is the counter to vote blue no matter who, which is basically no matter who the nominee is, we should support him so that Trump's out of office. The counter to that now is walk away, which is from the Democratic Party. Which is basically the Bernie bros who are like, well, since Sanders not the nominee and Joe Biden is the nominee, I guess I'm either voting for Trump or not voting for either of the two major parties.
Hey guys, which sexual predator do you want to vote for this November? Yeah. Stop. There is by trying to by even making jokes that there is a moral equivalency between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, you are making a massive mistake.
Yeah. The people that are claiming walk away are the same people that don't need to worry about politics affecting their real lives because they live in that position of privilege. And I'm not saying that I don't live in a position of privilege, but at least I recognize it. I don't know how blind to your privilege you have to be to be a Bernie Sanders supporter so that you support, giving rights to millions of Americans, especially LGBT Americans and, Hispanic Americans and African Americans.
Protecting people from having their voting rights taken away.
And then saying, oh, but you know what? I don't care if Joe Biden's the president. I'm okay with it being Donald Trump, who objectively has not been fighting for gay rights, whose vice president is not opposed to electroshock therapy, who wants to build a border wall and is actively fighting against Hispanic Americans, putting them in cages, with African Americans, has been doing virtually nothing to actually try to improve their standing, and has supported, voting restrictions in Georgia, to say, if you support Bernie Sanders' platform and you will not vote for the Democratic candidate, you are actively working against what Bernie has been pushing for 50 years of his political career. That's my rant.
Straight facts.
Say
it is. Look. I'm gonna. This is, and if you're listening to this, our responsibility collectively. If you are a registered Democrat, if you're somebody who wants to see Trump out of office, I hate to be saying this again because we heard this argument before in 2016. It's like, but do I have to vote for Hillary? But do I have to vote for Biden? Yes, you do. It is. Yeah, it is an unfortunate fact, and do whatever you have to do to get yourself to convince yourself to be excited about this guy, and vote down the ballot for Democrats. It's not like the presidency is the only thing that matters.
Ideally, we would have not first past the post system. I think our presidential system would be very good if it was something like France's. Not necessarily without the Electoral College. That's its own separate debate. But the thing that France does really nicely is they allow as many candidates to run as possible, and whichever two. It's the same way California does their primaries, where it's not a party primary, but every single candidate is on the ballot, and whichever two get the highest percentage of votes are the two you vote for. So it's a two-round electoral system. What?
In California, they always complain that the two that, well, number one, in California, it's always two Democrats running against each other. Because it seems to be always two establishment Democrats.
Because of that. So there are obviously cons to it. And the other con, which is also part of the Democratic thing, is sometimes there's a fear that having too many Democrats on the ballot will make it so that the two candidates are Republicans. But the thing is, in a plurality system, like we already have not even a plurality system where you can not even come out with a plurality of the votes and still become president. This at least ensures that not only do you have a plurality in the first round or close to a plurality in the first round, you also have the majority because you can only vote for two candidates. So the way it would work here is, let's say June 10th is the first voting day, and you have every single candidate, all 25 Democrats and, 4 Republicans that were running. You vote for whichever ones you like the most. Trump would end up with probably about 40% of that vote from all the Republicans that like him. You'd see Biden with some, Bernie with some, Pete with some, and whichever one of them gets the most votes out of all the Democrats would run against Trump. And that would happen in November. So it's very similar to the primary system, but like in 2016, you probably wouldn't have seen Hillary be the nominee. You probably would have seen Bernie because of the moderate Republicans who did not like Trump and did not like Hillary and would vote for someone like Bernie over them. There's also, ranked choice voting or all those other reforms. But regardless of that, at
the end of the day, we don't live in that world.
In the current system we have, where Ross Perot can arguably lose both Bush and Quayle run in 96. Whoever ran in 96, excuse me for being young, but whoever ran in 96, Bush in 96, basically helping Clinton win. By taking 3 million votes away from the two Republican candidates, if that's your argument, like though. Third parties in our system where it's first past the post by state, third parties do not have a chance of winning. Voting third party will make it so that your interests, you are from an opportunity cost standpoint, voting against your interests.
I appreciate that from opportunity cost,
Yeah.
It's so not only are you voting against your interests, but because it is one or the other, if you're not voting for the candidate that has a chance, you are effectively condoning the other candidate. So this is a pretty harsh position, but it is a fair position. Mm-hmm. If you are voting for I don't know who the Green Party candidate is this time. It's some guy whose name starts with an H, Howie. Well, I thought it was like Howie Long, and I'm like, wait, no. But regardless of who you're voting for, whether it's Bill Weld, bless his heart, Bill Weld. If you're voting for Bill Weld, you're taking a vote away from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
If you're voting for the Green Party, you're taking a vote away from Joe Biden. It's just how it is.
So I'd phrase it even different than that. So if you think about it, so obviously a multi-party system would be best. I think everyone in America that's not Tom Perez or the leader of the RNC would agree that a multi-party system is probably the best thing for America. But that's, again, unfortunately not the reality we live in. So instead, if you don't think about it as specific candidates, but instead of policy positions, especially like in congressional races, you are voting not only for one person, but you're voting for a block of people. By voting for a Democrat, you are supporting other Democrats in Congress to help gain a majority to push platforms forward. In the same way, by voting for a president, you're voting for the leader of a block. So by voting for Biden, you are voting for a left-leaning leader to push a hopefully Democratic Congress forward in pushing forward policies. Does that make sense? Like you are not, it's regardless of Biden, you should be voting for the candidate that's closest to your political, in the general. You should be voting for the candidate who is closest to you politically so that he is pushing policies that are closer to what you want.
And that's the thing.
Any reasonable Sanders supporter, Biden is closer than Trump.
Exactly.
Period, hands down, end of sentence.
And that's the important thing. In the general, I'm going to be voting for Bernie in the primary. He's staying on the ballot in Pennsylvania. So by voting for Bernie in the primary, I'm going to be sending a message with my swing state Pennsylvania vote that, hey, Joe, as a Pennsylvanian, look at the left a little bit more. That is just my personal opinion. That's what I will do.
There's a lot more strategy. In the primary, there's a lot more strategy.
It is going to be my job as a registered Democrat, your job as a registered Democrat, to remind our fellow registered Democrats that they need to show up.
Yeah,
because if they don't show up, then we're going to be it's going to be back to square one.
Yeah, and to say the same about Republicans, even though we are not, if you couldn't tell from before, now you can very much tell. The same thing applies. Like if you don't like Trump, but you think that he's better than Biden, then you shouldn't be voting for Gary Johnson. And this hurts me to say politically, but from like a putting myself in your shoes perspective, if you do not like Trump, but think that Biden would be destructive to America for, whatever reason, then you should not be voting for Gary Johnson.
No, actually, I think they should be voting for Gary Johnson. Hey, Republicans, if Trump doesn't pass your purity test, vote for Gary Johnson.
No, the other argument you could make is that, voting for a third party gives them more of a turnout, which helps them with elections. But again, it's not going to do anything until we have a system in which voting is more localized, if not fully nationalized, if that makes sense. So either it goes down to, a congressional district-based system like Nebraska and Maine have it, which is personally what I would really like to see, or if it's less a national popular vote system. Regardless, third parties are not going to win unless there is a smaller pool of voters that they need to impress. So even if they get one electoral vote, if they campaign the hell out of northern Maine and get one electoral vote, that's huge. But they're not going to get anything in Virginia or in Pennsylvania or in Wisconsin, because that means they need to get 55% of the vote or 45% of the vote.
So in short, don't walk away. We have to come up with some kind of better hashtag. I don't know, engage. Yeah. Don't walk away from Joe Biden, because by walking away from Joe Biden, you're walking toward Donald Trump.
And you're walking away from Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
Walking towards the Green Party is walking away from Bernie Sanders. All right, I think that's a good way to end our rant and a good way to end our episode.
Ooh, one more thing. The Green Party once endorsed somebody who was a 9/11 truther.
Yes, this is true. But, the Democrats have also endorsed some segregationists. But regardless, We are just about at an hour, so our time's about up for this Thursday afternoon.
As always, our intro and outro music is by Paul Abrams and Rock Solid Panda, and it's been produced by Elise Duda.
And you can find a recording of this podcast on our YouTube channel, Catch 52, and make sure to follow us on all of our social medias, on our Facebooks, on our Twitters. Stay updated on airtimes, episode topics, and any upcoming guests we might have.
Hopefully, we're going to be having some more guests on. Hopefully, some relevant guests to our previous one. And we'll do our best to keep everybody updated in the meantime. But, we welcome your comments, your feedback, and your suggestions. Stay inside, everybody. Have a good Friday and a great weekend.